Welcome to Mr. Sleep Story, where stories come alive to guide you into peaceful sleep. Tonight, we journey into the mystical worlds existing in our collection of enchanting tales, where mystery, adventure, and wonder weave together under the glow of the moon. Close your eyes, relax your mind, and let the rhythm of my voice carry you to faraway lands. Today, story begins in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Prepare yourself to be transported back in time as we explore the epic tales of one of history's most legendary figures, Alexander the Great. A story of the ancient lands, bravery, ambition, and destiny of a man who shaped the course of history with his extraordinary conquests. In the ancient kingdom of Macedon, under the shadow of Mount Olympus, a legend was born. The year was 306 BCE, and the world heralded the arrival of a prince destined to leave an indelible mark on history. Alexander, the son of King Philip II and Queen Olympias, was no ordinary child. Even in his infancy, tales swirled of his uncanny charisma and fiery spirit, traits that would later define a conqueror. Alexander's childhood was steeped in wonder and ambition. Olympias, fiercely devoted and deeply spiritual, whispered to him stories of divine lineage. She claimed their blood carried the essence of Achilles, the hero of Troy. Philip, a warrior king who had united the fragmented Macedonian tribes, saw in his son a spark of greatness and resolved to shape him into a ruler of unparalleled might. But Alexander's education would be no mundane affair. At the age of 13, Philip summoned the greatest mind of the ancient world to tutor his son, the philosopher Aristotle. In a secluded grove known as the Nymphaeum, the young prince sat at the feet of the master, surrounded by companions who would one day become his loyal generals. Together, they explored the realms of philosophy, science, and literature. It was here that Alexander first encountered Homer's Iliad, a text that would ignite his imagination and serve as his lifelong companion. Under Aristotle's guidance, Alexander's mind became a battlefield of ideas and dreams. He learned of ethics, governance, and the natural world, but most importantly, he absorbed the ideals of heroism and glory. Aristotle's teachings planted within him a seed, a belief that he was destined not only to rule, but to transcend mortal boundaries and etch his name among the gods. Yet, Alexander was not confined to the scholarly life. His training extended to the rugged fields and fortresses of Macedon, where he mastered the art of war. By his father's side, he learned to ride, fight, and command. Legend has it that, as a boy, he tamed the untamable stallion Bucephalus, a black horse with fire in its eyes. While others failed, Alexander approached the creature with a keen eye and calm confidence. By turning the horse toward the sun, he subdued its fear of shadows and mounted it with ease. This act, witnessed by his astonished father, prompted Philip to proclaim, "My boy, you must find a kingdom big enough for your ambitions. Macedon is too small for you." Alexander's early years were a crucible of ambition, intellect, and unyielding discipline. By the time he reached his teenage years, the world could already sense the makings of greatness in him. With Aristotle's wisdom etched in his mind and Philip's warrior spirit coursing through his veins, Alexander stood poised on the precipice of history, ready to embark on the journey that would transform him into one of the most celebrated figures of all time. The boy was becoming a legend, and the adventure had only just begun. By the year was 338 BCE. The fate of Greece trembled in the balance. On the plains near the town of Chaeronea, an epic confrontation loomed. A battle between the rising power of Macedon, led by King Philip II, and the united forces of Athens and Thebes, defenders of a fading independence. Among the Macedonian ranks stood a figure of undeniable promise. The young Prince Alexander, only 18, eager to prove himself on the field of destiny. From the first light of dawn, the air was thick with tension, the cries of soldiers mingling with the clamor of shields and spears. King Philip, a seasoned tactician, had carefully planned his strategy, but it was Alexander who would be given a pivotal role. Commanding the elite companion cavalry, the prince was stationed on the Macedonian left wing, a place of honor and danger. To Alexander, this was no mere battle. It was a stage upon which to etch his name into the annals of glory. As the armies collided, the battlefield erupted into chaos. The Athenians, fighting with the desperation of those defending their freedom, surged forward with fury. The Thebans, fortified by their legendary sacred band, held their line with unyielding resolve. For hours, the tide of battle ebbed and flowed, neither side yielding an inch. Amid the cacophony of war, Alexander waited, his keen eyes scanning the enemy ranks, his heart aflame with purpose. At the critical moment, Philip's cunning plan unfolded. Feigning a retreat on the Macedonian right, the king lured the Athenians into overextending their line. The trap was set, and now it was Alexander's turn to strike. With a thunderous cry, he led the companion cavalry in a sweeping charge against the Theban flank. The earth shook beneath the hooves of Bucephalus, his faithful steed, as Alexander plunged into the fray like a storm unleashed. The sacred band, famed for their discipline and valor, met Alexander's charge head-on. But the prince fought with a ferocity and brilliance beyond his years. His sword flashed like lightning, cutting through the enemy ranks as he inspired his men to fight with unrelenting vigor. The Thebans, though valiant, were overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of the assault. One by one, their lines began to falter, their once unbreakable unity shattered by Alexander's audacious maneuver. As the Theban resistance crumbled, the rest of the Macedonian army surged forward, exploiting the breach. Chaos swept through the allied ranks as Philip's forces pressed their advantage. By nightfall, the battlefield belonged to Macedon. The sacred band lay defeated, their legendary reputation undone by the brilliance of the young prince. For Alexander, the Battle of Chaeronea was more than a victory. It was a defining moment. On that fateful day, he had proven himself not merely as a prince, but as a leader of men and a master of war. His courage and strategic acumen had turned the tide of battle and ensured Macedon's dominance over Greece. As the stars glittered above the silent battlefield, Philip embraced his son and spoke words that would echo through history. "You have surpassed even my wildest expectations." But Alexander, ever ambitious, gazed not at his father but at the horizon. For him, Chaeronea was just the beginning. The world awaited, and Alexander was ready to claim it. In the heart of Macedon, where mountains kissed the heavens and the Aegean winds whispered of destiny, a storm of ambition and betrayal brewed. The year was 336 BCE, and Alexander, son of Philip II, stood on the precipice of greatness. He was 20 years old, a warrior prince forged in the fires of battle, but his journey to the throne would be neither simple nor safe. King Philip II, the architect of Macedonian power, had brought the once fractured kingdom to the zenith of its might. Through conquest and cunning diplomacy, he had united Greece under his banner. Yet, even in triumph, the king could not escape the shadows of treachery. On a fateful summer day, during a grand celebration in the ancient city of Aegae, the unthinkable occurred. As Philip strode into the theater, adorned in the regalia of a conqueror, a dagger flashed. The assassin struck, and the mighty king fell, his lifeblood staining the soil he had ruled. The court erupted into chaos. Allies turned suspicious eyes upon each other, and enemies saw an opportunity to unravel the empire Philip had built. Amid the turmoil, one figure stood unshaken: Alexander. Grief for his father burned in his heart, but so too did the fire of determination. The throne, now empty, called to him, not as a gift, but as a challenge. The young prince wasted no time. Within hours of Philip's death, Alexander acted with the precision of a seasoned tactician. He rallied his closest allies and secured the loyalty of the companion cavalry, the elite warriors who had fought by his side at Chaeronea. His first move was to neutralize potential threats. Rivals to the throne, cousins, generals, and opportunistic nobles were swiftly dealt with. Some pledged loyalty, others met their end in the shadowed halls of the palace. But securing the throne was only half the battle. The Greek city-states, long resentful of Macedonian dominance, saw Philip's death as a chance to rise against their northern overlords. Athens whispered of rebellion, and Thebes sharpened its spears. Across the sea, the Persian Empire watched with interest, its satraps eyeing Macedon like wolves circling wounded prey. Alexander's response was as bold as it was swift. With the authority of a king not yet crowned, he marched southward into Greece, his army moving like a thundercloud over the plains. At Thermopylae, where Spartan courage once held back the Persian tide, Alexander proclaimed himself the rightful heir to his father's conquests. In Corinth, he summoned the League of Corinth, the council of Greek states united under Philip, and demanded their allegiance. Resistance flared in Thebes, where rumors of rebellion had grown into open defiance. Alexander answered with an iron fist. In a siege as ruthless as it was decisive, he crushed the Theban revolt, razing the city to the ground as a warning to all who would challenge him. The Greek world, stunned by his swiftness and resolve, bent the knee. Macedon was secure, and Alexander's authority was unchallenged. Returning to Macedon, Alexander was crowned king, the laurel wreath resting heavy upon his brow. Yet, as he stood before his people, he made it clear that his ambitions stretched far beyond the borders of his kingdom. The world, he proclaimed, was not a collection of lands to be divided, but a single stage for the brave to claim. In the months that followed, Alexander solidified his rule. He restructured the Macedonian army, blending Philip's discipline with his own audacious strategies. He rewarded loyalty and rooted out betrayal, ensuring that no dagger would find him as it had his father. But in his heart, he burned with a desire that would not be quenched, the dream of a campaign that would unite East and West and make him a legend for all time. Alexander's rise to the throne was not merely the ascent of a king. It was the beginning of an odyssey that would reshape the world. The young ruler, now master of Macedon and Greece, turned his gaze eastward, where the vast Persian Empire awaited. The throne was his, but his true journey had only just begun. The world whispered his name, not in fear, but in anticipation. Alexander the Great was no longer a prince, no longer just a man. He was a force of history, and his legend was only beginning to unfold. The year was 334 BCE, and the drums of destiny thundered across the ancient world. Alexander, now king of Macedon, led an army of warriors whose resolve was as unyielding as their steel. His eyes burned with ambition, his heart surged with purpose, and his gaze was fixed eastward, toward the mighty Persian Empire ruled by Darius III. What followed was a series of legendary campaigns that would carve Alexander's name into the annals of history. The dawn of Alexander's campaign began on the banks of the Granicus River, where the Persian satraps gathered a formidable force to halt the Macedonian advance. The river surged like a barrier of fate, separating the young conqueror from his first victory. Undeterred, Alexander led his cavalry into the torrent, his golden armor gleaming like the sun. As Macedonian and Persian forces clashed, the river turned crimson with the blood of warriors. Alexander, astride his loyal steed Bucephalus, charged through the chaos, cutting down enemy commanders and inspiring his men to follow. The Persian forces, though numerous, faltered under the relentless assault. Victory belonged to Alexander, and the road into Asia Minor lay open. Alexander's march continued, his army cutting through Asia Minor like a blade through silk. At Issus, Darius III himself gathered an enormous host, confident in overwhelming the young king. The Persian forces stretched across the plains like an unending tide, their banners fluttering beneath the sky. Undaunted, Alexander devised a brilliant strategy. He attacked the Persian left flank with a ferocity that shattered their formation, then turned his gaze to the center, where Darius stood surrounded by his elite guard. In the heat of battle, Alexander's cavalry surged forward, forcing the great king to flee in disgrace. The spoils of Issus were vast, and Darius's family was captured, but Alexander treated them with unexpected dignity, further cementing his reputation. Alexander's campaign brought him to the island city of Tyre, a fortress surrounded by the azure waters of the Mediterranean. The Tyrians, confident in their naval superiority, defied Alexander's demands for surrender. But the young conqueror would not be denied. In a feat of engineering and determination, Alexander ordered the construction of a massive causeway, turning the sea into his ally. For 7 relentless months, the siege raged. Finally, the Macedonian forces stormed the city, and Tyre fell, a testament to Alexander's unwavering resolve. From Tyre, Alexander turned southward to Gaza, a city of strategic importance. Despite its formidable defenses, Gaza fell to his relentless assault. Each victory solidified Alexander's grip on the Mediterranean and struck fear into the heart of Persia. Amid his conquests, Alexander founded the city of Alexandria on the Egyptian coast. It was not merely a settlement, but a vision of a new world, one that blended Greek and Egyptian culture, a symbol of unity and power. The city would become a beacon of knowledge and prosperity, its name immortalized in history. But the crowning moment of 331 BCE came on the plains of Gaugamela, where Darius III gathered the largest army the ancient world had ever seen. The battlefield stretched endlessly, and the Persian host seemed invincible. Yet, Alexander's genius turned the tide. With calculated precision, he unleashed a phalanx assault, creating a gap in the Persian lines. Leading his companion cavalry, Alexander charged directly toward Darius, forcing the Persian king to flee once more. The victory at Gaugamela was decisive. The Persian Empire lay at Alexander's feet, its once mighty ruler a fugitive. For Alexander, it was not merely a conquest, but a declaration to the world that no power, no force, could stand against him. By 331 BCE, Alexander had achieved what many thought impossible. From the Granicus River to the plains of Gaugamela, he had faced overwhelming odds and emerged victorious. His name echoed from the Aegean to the Indus, a symbol of courage, brilliance, and ambition. But for Alexander, the journey was far from over. The East still called, and his dream of a unified world drove him ever forward. The epic of Alexander the Great had only just begun, and the world would never be the same. In the spring of 330 BCE, Alexander the Great stood at the gates of Persepolis, the jewel of the Persian Empire. This was no ordinary city. It was the beating heart of Darius III's realm, a treasure trove of wealth and a symbol of Persian power. To conquer it was to conquer the soul of an empire. Alexander, fresh from his victories at Gaugamela and the capture of Babylon, now sought to claim Persepolis and make the world tremble at his name. The march to Persepolis was grueling, as Alexander's army crossed harsh mountain passes and encountered fierce resistance from Persian defenders. Yet, the Macedonians were unstoppable, their spirits lifted by the promise of untold riches and glory. As they descended into the lush plains of Persis, Persepolis rose before them, a city of splendor and defiance. The walls were thick and the gates heavily guarded, but Alexander knew that to take Persepolis was to shatter the last vestige of Darius's power. The city's defenders had little hope against the seasoned Macedonian army. Alexander's engineers built siege towers and battering rams with astonishing speed. The assault began under the cover of night, with Macedonian archers raining arrows upon the walls as ladders were raised. Alexander himself led the charge, his golden armor glinting in the moonlight, a beacon for his men. The walls crumbled under the relentless onslaught, and the Macedonian forces poured into the city. The defenders, overwhelmed and outnumbered, fought bravely, but were ultimately no match for Alexander's seasoned warriors. By dawn, Persepolis had fallen. The Macedonian banners fluttered over its towers, and Alexander rode triumphantly through its streets, his victory complete. Inside the city, Alexander found wealth beyond imagination. The royal palaces were adorned with gold and jewels, their storerooms overflowing with treasures accumulated over centuries. Alexander allowed his men to plunder the city, rewarding them for their loyalty and endurance. The soldiers reveled in their spoils, but Alexander's gaze lingered on the halls of the great palace, a place that symbolized the might of the Persian kings who had once sought to dominate Greece. As the days passed, Alexander's thoughts turned darker. Some accounts say it was the influence of a drunken revel. Others claim it was a calculated act of vengeance. The Persians had once burned Athens during the Greco-Persian Wars, and now Alexander would return the favor in kind. In a dramatic gesture, he ordered the great palace of Persepolis set ablaze. The fire began as a single spark, but soon it grew into an inferno. Flames roared through the grand halls, consuming the intricate carvings and gilded walls. The smoke billowed into the sky, a pillar of destruction visible for miles. The Macedonian soldiers watched in awe and silence as the city burned, its grandeur reduced to ash. Some among his men, even his closest advisors, questioned the act. Persepolis could have been a seat of his empire, they argued. But Alexander's decision was final. The destruction was a message to the world. The old order was gone, and in its place rose the dominion of Alexander the Great. As the fire smoldered, Alexander stood amidst the ruins, his face illuminated by the dying embers. Persepolis, once the pride of Persia, now lay in ruins. Yet, even in its destruction, the city marked a turning point in his campaign. With Persepolis destroyed, the Persian Empire was no more. Its spirit had been broken, its heart extinguished. But Alexander's journey was far from over. The sack of Persepolis was not the end of his conquests, but a prelude to greater ambitions. Ahead lay the pursuit of Darius, the exploration of the East, and the dream of uniting the known world under his rule. In the ashes of Persepolis, a new legend was forged, a tale of fire and glory that would echo through the ages, cementing Alexander's place as one of history's greatest conquerors. In the year 329 BCE, Alexander the Great, now ruler of the vast Persian Empire, set his sights on the distant lands of Bactria. But between him and this next conquest loomed the towering peaks of the Hindu Kush, an unforgiving mountain range where treacherous paths, bitter winds, and icy heights had defeated even the hardiest of travelers. Yet, for Alexander, the impossible was merely a challenge waiting to be conquered. News had reached Alexander that Bactria, a region known for its fertile valleys and fierce warriors, was restless under Macedonian rule. Spithridates, a Persian satrap, had allied with the fierce Scythians to defy Alexander's dominion. Alexander, ever ambitious, saw not just rebellion but an opportunity, a chance to solidify his hold on the east and to push his army further into uncharted lands. Gathering his men, Alexander declared their next journey, across the Hindu Kush and into the heart of Bactria. The announcement was met with murmurs of unease. The mountains were said to be impassable, their trails haunted by storms and perilous heights. Yet, Alexander's resolve burned brighter than any fear. "We are Macedonians," he declared. "Where others falter, we conquer." The march began at the foothills of the Hindu Kush, where the terrain quickly turned rugged. The air grew thinner, the paths narrower, and the cold more biting. Snow blanketed the peaks, transforming the landscape into a frozen labyrinth. Yet, Alexander led from the front, his golden armor glinting in the sun as he urged his men onward. Supplies dwindled as the days stretched into weeks. Horses slipped on icy trails, and men collapsed under the weight of their burdens. Avalanches thundered down the slopes, and howling winds carried away the desperate cries of the weary. Still, Alexander's determination was unshaken. He shared in his soldiers' hardships, eating their meager rations and wrapping himself in the same thin cloaks that barely shielded them from the cold. One night, as the army camped beneath the stars, Alexander gathered his men around a fire. He spoke of the heroes of old, of Achilles and Hercules, who faced insurmountable trials and emerged triumphant. "The Hindu Kush is not our enemy," he proclaimed. "It is our test, and we will pass it, as we have passed every trial before." After weeks of grueling ascent, the Macedonian army reached the summit. The soldiers, their faces gaunt and their spirits battered, gazed out over the expanse of Bactria stretching far below. It was a sight of indescribable beauty, a land of green valleys and winding rivers, promising life after the deathly cold of the mountains. But Alexander did not linger. He ordered his men to descend swiftly, knowing that survival still depended on reaching the fertile lands of Bactria. The descent, though treacherous, was eased by the promise of victory awaiting them. Upon reaching Bactria, Alexander wasted no time. His army, rejuvenated by the bounties of the land, engaged the local forces with the precision and ferocity that had become their hallmark. The Bactrian warriors, though skilled, could not match the disciplined phalanxes and swift cavalry maneuvers of the Macedonians. Mithridates and his Scythian allies were defeated in a series of battles, and the rebellious regions were brought under control. Alexander, ever the statesman, married Roxana, a Bactrian noblewoman, to solidify his rule and bridge the cultural divide between Macedonians and their new subjects. The crossing of the Hindu Kush was more than a physical feat. It was a testament to Alexander's unyielding will and his ability to inspire his men to achieve the impossible. The mountains, once seen as an insurmountable barrier, became another chapter in the epic of Alexander's conquests. As the Macedonian army camped in the lush valleys of Bactria, Alexander looked eastward, his ambition undiminished. Beyond lay the Indus River and the rich lands of India, a new horizon for a king whose dreams knew no bounds. The Hindu Kush, with its icy peaks and treacherous paths, had bowed to Alexander's resolve. And as the fires of their camp flickered against the starlit sky, the world knew that no obstacle, no matter how great, could stand against Alexander the Great. The year was 328 BCE, and Alexander the Great, fresh from his victories in Bactria and Sogdia, basked in the glory of his empire. Yet the further his conquests carried him, the more the young king seemed torn between the Macedonian traditions of his homeland and the allure of Eastern grandeur. In the city of Samarkand, deep in the heart of Central Asia, an episode unfolded that would forever stain his legacy. A clash between a king and his loyal friend, Black Cleitus. Samarkand, with its golden sands and bustling markets, had become a symbol of Alexander's expanding dominion. Here, in the grandeur of a Persian-style palace, the king hosted a feast to celebrate his recent triumphs and the loyalty of his men. Wine flowed like rivers, and the air buzzed with the laughter of warriors who had survived countless battles. Among those present was Cleitus the Black, one of Alexander's oldest companions. A seasoned general, Cleitus had fought alongside Philip II, Alexander's father, and had once saved Alexander's life at the Battle of the Granicus River. Their bond was forged in blood and shared victories, but in recent years, tensions had begun to simmer. Cleitus, a staunch defender of Macedonian traditions, had grown uneasy with Alexander's adoption of Persian customs and his increasing demand for divine reverence. As the feast wore on, the mood turned darker. Alexander, emboldened by drink and surrounded by his court, spoke of his greatness and the divine favor that had blessed his conquests. He boasted that his achievements surpassed those of his father, Philip. Some guests murmured in agreement, but Cleitus could not remain silent. Rising to his feet, Cleitus, also drunk, delivered a fiery rebuke. He reminded Alexander that it was Philip's groundwork that had paved the way for his victories. He mocked the king's growing arrogance and his desire to be treated as a god. "You owe your life to men like me," Cleitus declared, referencing the moment at Granicus when he had saved Alexander from a Persian blade. "But now, you sit here surrounded by foreigners who flatter your vanity." The room fell silent, the air heavy with tension. Alexander's face darkened, his pride wounded by Cleitus's words. Yet Cleitus, emboldened by years of camaraderie and perhaps too much wine, continued. He hurled insults at the king, mocking his Persian attire and accusing him of betraying his Macedonian heritage. Alexander's anger erupted like a storm. He rose from his seat, his voice cutting through the silence like thunder. "You dare to insult me, here in my court, before my men," he bellowed. His eyes burned with fury, and his hand reached for his weapon. At first, the other guests intervened, pulling Alexander back and urging Cleitus to leave. But the damage was done. Cleitus, unwilling to back down, stood his ground and shouted one final insult. "You are no god, Alexander. You are merely a man who forgets his friends." Alexander, overcome by a blinding rage, broke free from the hands that restrained him. He seized a spear from a nearby guard and hurled it with all his strength. The weapon struck Cleitus in the chest, silencing him instantly. The great warrior who had saved Alexander's life and stood by him in countless battles fell to the ground, his blood staining the marble floor. As the room descended into chaos, the reality of what he had done dawned on Alexander. His rage melted into despair as he looked down at the lifeless body of his friend. He had not killed an enemy, but a brother in arms, a man who had once been his shield in the heat of battle. Overcome with guilt, Alexander retreated to his chambers, tearing at his hair and wailing in anguish. For days he refused food or drink, consumed by the weight of his actions. His advisors tried to console him, but the king could not forgive himself. "I have slain my own protector," he lamented, "and brought ruin to the bond of trust that held us together." The death of Black Cleitus marked a turning point in Alexander's reign. It symbolized the growing isolation of a man who had once been surrounded by loyal companions, but now stood alone at the pinnacle of power. The incident revealed the strain between Alexander's Macedonian roots and his vision of a unified empire, a vision that increasingly alienated those who had fought by his side. Though Alexander would go on to achieve even greater conquests, the memory of Cleitus's death haunted him. It was a reminder that even the greatest of kings could be undone by their own pride and anger. And so, the story of Alexander and Black Cleitus became a tragic chapter in the epic tale of a man whose ambition knew no bounds, yet whose humanity was fraught with flaws. The year was 327 BCE, and Alexander the Great stood on the brink of the unknown. Behind him stretched the vast expanse of his conquests, from Macedon to the farthest reaches of Persia. Before him lay the mysteries of India, a land of untold riches and fabled warriors. But amid the relentless march of his empire, Alexander paused for a moment that would echo through history. His marriage to Roxane, a princess of Bactria, and the beginning of his legendary march to the east. In the rugged mountains of Bactria, Alexander encountered resistance from the fierce local tribes. Among the captured was Roxane, the daughter of Oxyartes, a nobleman who had opposed the Macedonian advance. Roxane's beauty was said to rival that of the gods themselves, her grace captivating even the battle-hardened Macedonians. Her spirit was unbroken, her pride evident in every glance, and her courage caught the eye of the conqueror. For Alexander, Roxane was more than a prize of war. She was a symbol of unity. Her lineage represented the defiant heart of Bactria, and her marriage to the Macedonian king would bridge the divide between conqueror and conquered. It was a union of worlds, a step toward Alexander's vision of a unified empire where East and West could coexist. The marriage of Alexander and Roxane was unlike any other. In a ceremony blending Macedonian and Persian traditions, the young king placed a golden diadem upon Roxane's head, declaring her his queen. The ceremony was held high in the Bactrian mountains, under a sky ablaze with stars, as if the heavens themselves bore witness to the union. The Macedonian army celebrated with feasts and revelry, their king's marriage seen as both a personal triumph and a strategic victory. For Alexander, it was a moment of humanity amid the relentless tide of conquest, a rare pause to honor love and alliance. With Bactria subdued and his bond to the region cemented through marriage, Alexander turned his gaze eastward. Tales of India, a land of immense wealth and wisdom, had reached his ears. It was said that great kings ruled there, their armies guarded by elephants as fearsome as mountains. For Alexander, this was not merely a land to conquer. It was a realm to explore, a mystery to unravel. The march to India began with a sense of anticipation. Alexander's army, though weary from years of campaigning, was inspired by their king's unyielding vision. The soldiers followed him not out of obligation, but because they believed in the dream he carried, a dream of standing at the edge of the known world and looking beyond. The path to India was fraught with challenges. The Hindu Kush, which Alexander had once crossed to reach Bactria, loomed again like a wall between him and his next conquest. The treacherous passes tested the mettle of his men, but Alexander's determination was unshaken. He led his army with the same vigor that had driven them across the Persian Empire, sharing in their hardships and inspiring loyalty with every step. As the Macedonians descended into the Indus Valley, they encountered new wonders: lush forests, rivers teeming with life, and cities adorned with unfamiliar splendor. The soldiers whispered of strange gods and powerful kings, their imaginations aflame with the possibilities that lay ahead. Though Alexander's march to India was marked by battles and triumphs, his marriage to Roxane remained a cornerstone of his vision. She traveled with him, a queen who represented the fusion of cultures that Alexander sought to achieve. Their union was more than a personal bond. It was a political statement, a symbol of the harmony Alexander dreamed of creating across his empire. As the army prepared to face the formidable kings of India, Alexander stood at the head of his men, a king, a husband, and a dreamer. With Roxane by his side and the world before him, he was ready to etch the next chapter of his legend into the fabric of history. The marriage of Alexander and Roxane marked the merging of two worlds, a union that symbolized the ideals of unity and conquest. As the Macedonian army ventured into the unknown, Alexander's dream of a boundless empire drove him forward, a dream fueled not only by ambition, but also by the connections he forged along the way. The journey to India would test Alexander's limits and cement his place as one of history's greatest adventurers. But as he marched into the east, the memory of that starry night in Bactria, where love and destiny intertwined, remained a part of the epic that was Alexander the Great. The year was 326 BCE, and Alexander the Great stood on the edge of the Hydaspes River, deep in the heart of India. Before him lay a formidable challenge. King Porus, a ruler of immense stature and courage, commanded an army that included towering war elephants, beasts of legend whose power could shatter entire lines. For Alexander, this was not merely a battle for conquest. It was a test of his tactical brilliance and unyielding resolve. The Hydaspes flowed swift and wide, its waters shimmering under the Indian sun. On its far bank, Porus's forces waited, their ranks bristling with spears and the massive silhouettes of war elephants. These beasts, clad in armor and carrying warriors atop their howdahs, formed a living wall of destruction. Porus had chosen his position well, confident that the river would protect his flank and discourage any direct assault. But Alexander, undeterred by the natural barrier, saw not an obstacle, but an opportunity. He was determined to outthink and outmaneuver his opponent, as he had done so many times before. As night fell, Alexander devised his plan. He ordered a portion of his army to remain visible on the riverbank, creating the illusion of an impending frontal assault. Meanwhile, under the cover of darkness, he led a select force upstream, where the river narrowed and a dense forest concealed their movements. The crossing was perilous. The Hydaspes roared with the force of the monsoon rains, and the soldiers struggled to keep their footing against the rushing waters. Yet Alexander, leading from the front, inspired his men with his courage and determination. By dawn, his force had reached the far bank, their presence a thunderbolt of surprise for Porus. The battle began with a Macedonian cavalry charge, aimed at disrupting the Indian left flank. Porus responded swiftly, sending his elephants into the fray. The ground shook as the beasts thundered forward, their tusks sweeping aside men and horses. The Macedonian lines wavered but did not break, their discipline and training holding firm against the terrifying onslaught. Alexander, riding Bucephalus, his faithful steed, saw the key to victory. The elephants were formidable, but they could be isolated and neutralized. He ordered his archers to focus on the elephant crews, raining arrows upon the warriors who guided the beasts. Deprived of their riders, the elephants panicked, trampling friend and foe alike. Meanwhile, Alexander led a decisive cavalry strike against Porus's center, targeting the Indian king himself. Porus, a giant of a man, stood tall on his elephant, his spear gleaming in the sun. He fought with the valor of a true warrior, rallying his troops and challenging Alexander to single combat. But Alexander, ever the strategist, avoided a direct clash, instead focusing on breaking the cohesion of Porus's forces. As the elephants faltered and the Indian lines began to crumble, Alexander pressed his advantage. His infantry advanced in disciplined formations, exploiting the gaps created by the chaos. The Macedonian phalanx, with its long spears and unyielding ranks, drove back the Indian warriors, step by bloody step. Porus, wounded but unyielding, continued to fight with unmatched bravery. His defiance inspired his men, but the tide of the battle had turned irrevocably. Surrounded and outnumbered, the Indian army was finally overcome. When the battle was over, Alexander approached the captured Porus, who stood proud despite his defeat. "How would you like to be treated?" Alexander asked, impressed by the king's valor. "Like a king," Porus replied, his voice steady and resolute. Alexander, moved by his courage and dignity, spared Porus and restored him to his throne as a vassal ruler. It was an act of magnanimity that cemented Alexander's reputation as not only a conqueror, but also a statesman who respected strength and honor in his enemies. The Battle of the Hydaspes was one of Alexander's most challenging and brilliant victories. It showcased his ability to adapt, innovate, and lead, even against a foe armed with unfamiliar and terrifying weapons. The victory marked the furthest reach of his conquests in India, a land of endless wonders and formidable resistance. As Alexander's army celebrated on the banks of the Hydaspes, the young king gazed eastward. The horizon called to him, but so too did the growing weariness of his men, whose loyalty had carried him across the known world. The Hydaspes River, its waters now quiet, bore witness to an epic clash of kings. A moment where the ambitions of Alexander met the unyielding courage of Porus. It was a battle that would echo through the ages, a testament to the greatness of both conqueror and defender. The seeds of Alexander's downfall were sown years earlier on the banks of the Beas River in India. His army, weary from years of relentless campaigning and battered by monsoon rains, stood at the edge of the known world. Beyond the river lay the riches of the Ganges plain, but also the threat of immense Indian armies and endless war. Alexander, driven by his unquenchable thirst for glory, urged his men to press on. He spoke of immortal fame and the promise of a world united under their banners. Yet the soldiers, veterans of countless battles, had reached their limits. They longed for home, for the familiar lands of Macedon and the comforts of family. A murmur of dissent rose among the ranks, growing into open mutiny. The soldiers, who had followed Alexander through deserts and over mountains, now refused to march further. It was a moment of rare defeat for the king. Though he raged and pleaded, Alexander ultimately relented. He turned his army back, the dream of reaching the ends of the earth left unrealized. Yet, in his heart, the decision left a scar that would never heal. The journey back from India was fraught with peril. Alexander led his army through the unforgiving Gedrosian desert, where thirst and starvation claimed the lives of thousands. The once mighty Macedonian force, triumphant in battle after battle, now struggled to survive against the merciless elements. Each step back toward Babylon was a reminder of the price of ambition, the fragility of even the greatest of empires. When Alexander finally returned to Babylon in 324 BCE, the city was a beacon of hope and renewal. Its grandeur symbolized the unity of his empire, a blending of east and west that reflected his vision. Yet the cost of his campaigns weighed heavily on both king and kingdom. His army was depleted, his generals weary, and the whispers of rebellion stirred in distant provinces. In the spring of 323 BCE, as Alexander planned new campaigns, this time to conquer Arabia, fate intervened. During a banquet in Babylon, the king fell ill. At first, the symptoms seemed minor, a fever, exhaustion, but they quickly worsened. His once boundless energy faded, and his powerful frame weakened. Alexander's closest companions gathered around him as his condition deteriorated. Some whispered of poison, others of divine retribution for his hubris. Yet the true cause remained a mystery. Was it malaria, typhoid, or simply the toll of years spent on the battlefield and in relentless pursuit of glory? As the days passed, Alexander's voice, once commanding and vibrant, grew faint. He gave final orders to his generals, his mind still racing with plans for new conquests, even as his body failed him. When asked who should succeed him, the king reportedly replied, "To the strongest," a cryptic phrase that sowed the seeds of conflict among his successors. On the 10th or 11th of June, 323 BCE, Alexander the Great breathed his last. He was 32 years old, a titan whose life had reshaped the world. Babylon, the city where he had hoped to rule over a united empire, became the stage for his tragic end. As the news of his death spread, shock and grief rippled through the empire. In the streets of Babylon, soldiers and citizens wept openly, mourning the loss of a king who had seemed larger than life. Yet, even in death, Alexander's legend only grew. His empire, though fractured and contested, became a testament to his ambition and vision. Alexander's death marked the end of an era but the beginning of a legend. His generals, the famed Diadochi, divided his empire and waged wars in his name, but none could match his brilliance or charisma. Cities bearing his name, like Alexandria in Egypt, stood as lasting monuments to his conquests and vision. The man who had once dreamed of uniting the world had been brought down not by an army or a rival, but by the weight of his own humanity. Yet, his spirit lived on in the stories, the cities, and the cultures he had touched. The death of Alexander in Babylon was not the end of his epic, but the final chapter in a saga that would inspire generations. He had crossed rivers, mountains, and deserts. He had faced kings, elephants, and armies, and, in the end, he had faced mortality itself. And though he fell, his name rose eternal, a beacon of ambition, courage, and the indomitable will to shape the world. As the echoes of ancient battles fade and the sands of history settle, this tale of courage comes to its conclusion. Remember, every night holds a new adventure, and we're here to make your journey to sleep as calming and enriching as possible. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Mr. Sleep Story. Hit the notification bell so you'll never miss another bedtime tale. Tonight, let your worries drift away as we journey into the starry skies above, as we explore the enchanting tales behind the constellations. Stories passed down through generations, filled with wonder, mythology, and timeless wisdom. We'll begin our journey with the tale of Centaurus. Long ago, in a time when gods walked among mortals and magic flowed like rivers through the veins of the earth, there lived a being unlike any other, a centaur named Chiron. Born of the heavens and the wild earth, Chiron was no ordinary centaur. He was a creature of wisdom, grace, and profound kindness. The gods themselves revered him, for his heart burned with the fire of knowledge and his hands healed even the deepest wounds. Chiron wandered the forests and mountains, teaching humans the secrets of the stars, the healing arts, and the songs of the universe. Wherever he roamed, peace followed, as if the world itself recognized the magic within him. But, as with all tales of magic and immortals, there came a moment when fate intervened. One fateful day, as heroes gathered for a grand hunt, a poisoned arrow struck Chiron by mistake. Though the wound should have been his end, Chiron was immortal, destined to endure the agony without release. The gods, moved by his selflessness and the pain he bore, offered him a choice: to relinquish his immortality and ascend to the heavens, or to remain on earth, enduring his suffering in silence. Chiron, with the wisdom and compassion that defined him, chose to sacrifice his immortal life to free another, Prometheus, the Titan who had gifted fire to mankind. As Chiron's spirit left the earth, the heavens wept, but they could not let such a soul fade into obscurity. The gods gathered his essence and cast it into the stars, where it formed the magnificent constellation of Centaurus. Now, Centaurus gallops across the celestial sphere, a guardian of wisdom and a beacon of healing. The stars within his form shimmer with the echoes of his teachings and the kindness he shared. When you gaze upon him in the night sky, you may feel the soft hum of his magic, reminding us that knowledge, compassion, and sacrifice are the truest forms of strength. And so, the constellation Centaurus remains a tale etched in the stars, a story of a noble heart that chose to shine forever in the heavens. Beneath the shimmering veil of the night sky lies a constellation with a tale as ancient and mesmerizing as the stars themselves. The story of Scorpius, the celestial scorpion. In a time when gods ruled the cosmos and myths wove the fabric of reality, the earth was blessed by the presence of Orion, the mighty hunter. Orion was a figure of unmatched strength and beauty, boasting skills that made mortals marvel and gods whisper in admiration. Yet, with such gifts came a shadow, his pride. One day, as Orion roamed the wilds, he boasted that no creature on earth could ever match his prowess, claiming he could hunt and conquer anything the world offered. His words echoed into the heavens, reaching Gaia, the great earth goddess. Gaia, guardian of all living things, was displeased by Orion's arrogance, for she cherished even the smallest of her creations. To humble the hunter, Gaia summoned from her depths a scorpion unlike any other. This was no ordinary creature. Its stinger gleamed with a venom that could fell the mightiest of beings, and its form shimmered with an ethereal, otherworldly glow. The scorpion, silent yet fierce, was tasked with reminding Orion of the balance that must always exist between strength and humility. When the two met, the clash was inevitable. Orion, confident in his might, underestimated the scorpion's speed and cunning. As the battle raged, the scorpion struck, its stinger delivering a blow that no mortal or immortal could withstand. Orion fell, his pride subdued by the small yet powerful creature. The gods, moved by the significance of the encounter, immortalized both Orion and the scorpion in the heavens. Orion was placed on one side of the sky, a testament to his strength and the lessons learned. Scorpius, however, was set in the opposite corner, its stinger arched and ready, as if forever chasing the hunter across the celestial dome. And so, the stars of Scorpius burn brightly in the night sky, a reminder of Gaia's wisdom and the power of even the smallest creature. When you see Scorpius on a warm summer night, its tail curling through the heavens, you might feel its magic, a whisper of balance, humility, and the intricate dance of strength and respect. The scorpion's legacy, written in starlight, is one of courage and the eternal harmony of the cosmos. High above, in the shimmering expanse of the night sky, a constellation dances like a song come to life, a tale whispered by the waves and carried on the winds of eternity. This is the story of Delphinus, the celestial dolphin, whose heart is as vast as the ocean, and whose magic touches the souls of dreamers. Long ago, when the world was young and gods still walked among mortals, there lived a poet-musician named Arion. His melodies were so enchanting that even the stars seemed to sway in rhythm, and his songs were said to bring joy to the gods themselves. Arion often traveled the seas, spreading his music to distant lands and gathering treasures in return. One fateful voyage, his ship sailed beneath a sky of gold, but the hearts of the sailors were dark with greed. Coveting Arion's treasures, they plotted to take his life and steal his wealth. When their intentions were revealed, Arion pleaded for his life, asking only for one final request: to sing one last song. The sailors, charmed by his plea, agreed. Arion stood at the ship's edge, his harp glistening in the sunlight, and began to play. The notes rose and fell like waves, weaving a melody so pure that it seemed to summon the spirit of the sea itself. As he played, the waters stirred, and from the depths emerged a dolphin of silver and sapphire, its eyes sparkling with ancient wisdom. When the song ended, Arion leapt into the sea, trusting in the dolphin's grace. The celestial creature carried him upon its back, leaping through the waves with effortless beauty, as though it were riding the threads of a magical symphony. Together they traveled far beyond the reach of the treacherous sailors, who watched in awe as their ship was swallowed by a sudden storm, a punishment from the gods. The dolphin brought Arion safely to the shores of his homeland, where he sang of his miraculous escape and the loyalty of his oceanic savior. The gods, moved by the courage of Arion and the noble heart of the dolphin, immortalized their bond in the stars. Today, the constellation Delphinus leaps joyfully across the sky, a beacon of hope, harmony, and the unbreakable bond between music, magic, and the sea. Its stars twinkle with the echoes of Arion's song, inviting all who gaze upon them to believe in the power of kindness and the miracles hidden within the depths of the unknown. When you look to the stars and find Delphinus, may you feel the ocean's embrace and hear the distant melody of a tale that will live forever. Our next constellation soars with wings outstretched, its stars glimmering like the golden feathers of a mythical bird. This is the tale of Aquila, the celestial eagle, whose story is entwined with the gods and their divine purpose. Long ago, in the age of heroes and gods, the great king of Olympus, Zeus, sought a messenger unlike any other. He needed a creature swift as the wind, strong as the mountains, and noble enough to carry the weight of divine tasks. From the highest peaks of the heavens, Zeus called forth an eagle of unmatched beauty and power. This eagle was no ordinary bird. It was a being of celestial magic, with feathers that shimmered like molten gold and eyes that gleamed with the wisdom of the cosmos. The eagle, who would come to be known as Aquila, was a symbol of loyalty and strength, destined to serve as Zeus's sacred herald and companion. Aquila's most famous task came during one of Zeus's greatest tests for humanity. The gods had gifted fire to mankind through Prometheus, but Zeus, angered by Prometheus's defiance, sought to punish him. Yet, even in his wrath, Zeus saw the need for balance. He commanded Aquila to serve as both a reminder of the gods' power and a guardian of the gift that had been given. But Aquila's legend does not end with the gods' punishments. It is said that when Zeus fell in love with the mortal Ganymede, a prince of such beauty that even the stars seemed to bow before him, he sent Aquila to carry the boy to Olympus. With his mighty wings, Aquila swept down from the heavens, his talons as gentle as moonlight, and lifted Ganymede to the realm of the gods, where he became the cupbearer of the divine. For his unyielding loyalty and grace, Zeus immortalized Aquila among the stars, placing him in the heavens as a guardian of the skies. There, Aquila soars eternally, a symbol of strength, devotion, and the bond between the mortal and the divine. His stars form a majestic eagle in flight, his wings spread wide across the night sky, as if ready to carry the dreams of those who look up in wonder. When you see Aquila on a clear night, its brightest star, Altair, shining like a beacon, remember the eagle's timeless tale. Listen closely, and you may hear the rush of his wings in the whispers of the wind, carrying the echoes of divine stories and the promise of courage to all who dare to dream. Aquila traversed the heavens with wings, but our next constellation preferred to slither like a ribbon of light, its form mysterious and enchanting. This is the tale of Serpens, the celestial serpent, whose story winds through the realms of gods, healers, and the eternal mysteries of life and death. Long ago, in a time when mortals sought wisdom from the gods and the earth brimmed with ancient magic, there lived a healer of unmatched skill named Asclepius. Asclepius was no ordinary mortal. He was a son of Apollo, blessed with a divine touch and a heart full of compassion. He wandered the lands, curing the sick, mending the broken, and even, it is said, pulling souls back from the brink of death itself. One fateful day, as Asclepius rested beneath the shade of an olive tree, he noticed a serpent slithering near. Its emerald scales shimmered like jewels in the sunlight, and its eyes gleamed with an otherworldly intelligence. The serpent coiled itself near Asclepius, as if drawn to the healer's aura. Suddenly, another serpent appeared, carrying in its mouth an herb of radiant green. The second serpent laid the herb upon the first, and, to Asclepius's amazement, the injured serpent was healed, springing to life with renewed vitality. From this magical encounter, Asclepius learned the secrets of life and death, gaining the wisdom to wield the herb in his own healing practices. With its power, he could even defy mortality itself, restoring the lives of those who had crossed into the shadowy realm of Hades. But such power was not without consequence. The gods, ever watchful, grew uneasy. Hades, lord of the underworld, feared that Asclepius's gift would disrupt the balance of life and death. Zeus, the king of the gods, struck Asclepius down with a thunderbolt, ending his mortal journey but immortalizing his legacy. To honor the serpent's role in Asclepius's knowledge, and as a symbol of healing and renewal, Zeus placed Serpens in the sky. Unlike other constellations, Serpens is unique, split into two parts: Serpens caput, the serpent's head, and Serpens cauda, the serpent's tail. Held by the constellation Ophiuchus, the serpent-bearer, said to represent Asclepius himself. Even now, Serpens slithers across the celestial sphere, a reminder of the intertwined forces of life, death, and rebirth. Its stars glimmer with the mysteries of the healer's craft, carrying the wisdom of the ancients and the eternal quest for balance in the cosmos. When you gaze upon Serpens, let its serpentine form guide your imagination to the hidden truths of the universe, where the line between mortal and divine, death and life, is as delicate as a serpent's glide across the earth. In the velvet expanse of the night sky, a mighty figure strides boldly among the stars, his belt gleaming like a jeweled crown of the heavens. This is Orion, the celestial hunter, whose tale is one of bravery, hubris, and eternal pursuit. Long ago, in an age when gods and mortals walked the same earth, Orion was born, a child of the sea god Poseidon and a mortal queen. Blessed with extraordinary strength, boundless courage, and unmatched beauty, Orion was destined for greatness. He became a hunter of legendary skill, his arrows swift and true, his presence commanding respect from all who knew him. Orion wandered the lands, seeking challenges worthy of his prowess. His adventures brought him to the court of the goddess Artemis, mistress of the hunt and protector of the wild. Together they roamed the forests and fields, their bond deepening with each shared hunt. Orion's boldness and skill even earned the admiration of Apollo, Artemis's twin brother, though the sun god secretly envied Orion's favor with his sister. But, like the brightest star, Orion's pride burned too fiercely. He declared that no creature in the world could escape his might, that his skill surpassed even the will of the gods. These words reached Gaia, the great earth goddess, who frowned upon such arrogance. To remind Orion of his place in the delicate balance of creation, Gaia summoned a scorpion of immense power, whose sting carried the fury of the earth itself. The scorpion and the hunter met in a battle that shook the heavens. Despite his strength, Orion was no match for the creature's deadly sting. As the venom coursed through him, the mighty hunter fell, his pride shattered, his life extinguished. Heartbroken by the loss of her companion, Artemis begged Zeus to honor Orion's memory. Moved by her tears, the king of the gods placed Orion among the stars, his figure forever etched into the night sky. The scorpion, too, was immortalized, becoming the constellation Scorpius, set on the opposite side of the celestial sphere. Even now, the two constellations seem locked in an eternal chase, as Scorpius rises while Orion sets. Orion's stars shine brilliantly, his belt, a line of 3 glittering jewels, serving as a guide for stargazers throughout the ages. His outstretched arm, bow in hand, points toward the heavens, as if still hunting for the adventures that eluded him in life. Look to the sky on a clear winter night, and you will see Orion, a symbol of humanity's daring spirit, and the lessons learned when pride meets humility. His story, written in the stars, is a reminder that even the mightiest must honor the balance of the cosmos. Our next constellation is one of great mystery and power. Known as Ophiuchus, the serpent-bearer, it is a symbol of healing, wisdom, and the delicate balance between life and death. Its tale is one of courage, divine favor, and the eternal quest for knowledge. Long ago, in a time when the gods shaped the fates of mortals, there lived a healer named Asclepius, born of a mortal woman and Apollo, the radiant god of light and prophecy. From the moment of his birth, Asclepius was destined for greatness, carrying the gift of healing in his very soul. Taught by Chiron, the wise centaur, Asclepius learned the secrets of medicine, becoming a master of the healing arts. One fateful day, as Asclepius walked through a forest, he encountered a serpent, its scales glistening like emeralds in the sunlight. Unafraid, he watched as the serpent shed its skin, transforming itself into a renewed, vibrant form. From this act, Asclepius gained a profound understanding of the cycle of life and death, the power of transformation, and the potential for renewal. Guided by this revelation, Asclepius devoted himself to healing not only the body, but the soul. His skills grew so great that he could revive the dead, pulling souls from the underworld and restoring them to the living. This power, however, disturbed the balance of the cosmos. Hades, lord of the underworld, was enraged, for the natural order of life and death had been disrupted. Zeus, the king of the gods, intervened to preserve this balance. Striking Asclepius down with a thunderbolt, Zeus ended the healer's mortal life but honored his incredible legacy. Asclepius was placed among the stars as Ophiuchus, the serpent-bearer, holding the serpent that had gifted him the wisdom of renewal and transformation. The serpent, too, became part of the constellation, winding through Ophiuchus's hands in an eternal embrace. Together, they remind us of the duality of existence, life and death, healing and harm, chaos and order. Even now, Ophiuchus glimmers in the night sky, a silent guardian of knowledge and healing. Though not traditionally part of the zodiac's 12 signs, it stands as a symbol of the 13th path, a secret road of discovery and wisdom that not all dare to follow. When you look upon the stars of Ophiuchus, let their light inspire you to seek the mysteries of life with courage and humility. For in his celestial form, Asclepius still holds the serpent, offering the ancient promise that even in endings, there are beginnings, and in all things, a chance for transformation. If you look high in the northern sky, where the stars glisten like scattered diamonds, you'll notice a mighty bear roaming amongst the heavens. That is Ursa Major, the great bear, whose tale is one of transformation, devotion, and the watchful eyes of the gods. Long ago, in a world where gods often mingled with mortals, there lived a maiden of extraordinary beauty named Callisto. She was a companion of the goddess Artemis, sworn to a life of purity and devotion to the hunt. Callisto's radiant spirit and graceful presence made her beloved among Artemis's followers, but her beauty also caught the attention of Zeus, the mighty king of the gods. Zeus, captivated by Callisto, descended from Olympus and approached her in disguise. Though Callisto resisted, her fate was sealed, and she bore a child, a son named Arcas. This betrayal angered Artemis, who, feeling that Callisto had broken her vows, cast her out of the sacred circle of the hunt. But the wrath of the gods was not finished. Hera, Zeus's wife, discovered the affair and burned with jealousy. To punish Callisto, Hera transformed her into a great bear, her human beauty hidden beneath thick fur and sharp claws. As a bear, Callisto wandered the forests, her heart aching with the loss of her son and her former life. Years passed, and Arcas grew into a skilled hunter, unaware of his mother's fate. One day, as he hunted in the woods, he came face to face with a massive bear. Not recognizing his mother, Arcas raised his spear, ready to strike. Zeus, watching from the heavens, could not allow such a tragic end to their story. In a flash of divine light, he swept both Callisto and Arcas into the sky, saving them from their fateful encounter. Callisto became Ursa Major, the great bear, her immense form stretching across the heavens. Arcas was placed nearby as Ursa Minor, the little bear, forever close to his mother. Hera's anger, however, was unyielding. She forbade the bears from ever resting in the waters of the ocean, and so they endlessly circle the northern sky, never dipping below the horizon. Even now, they wander the celestial sphere, their stars shining as a symbol of love, endurance, and the unbreakable bond between mother and child. When you look up at Ursa Major, with its famous 7 stars forming the Big Dipper, remember Callisto's story. Her eternal journey through the night sky is a reminder that even in the face of hardship and transformation, love remains a guiding light, shining brightly for all to see. Nestled near its larger counterpart is a constellation that carries the essence of guidance and love. This is Ursa Minor, the little bear, whose tale is intertwined with destiny, devotion, and the unyielding bond of family. Long ago, in a time when gods watched over the earth and the stars held the secrets of the cosmos, there lived a child named Arcas, the son of Callisto, a mortal maiden, and Zeus, the king of the gods. Though Arcas was born of divine lineage, his life was not without trials, for his mother, Callisto, had been cruelly transformed into a bear by the jealous goddess Hera. Unaware of his mother's fate, Arcas grew up strong and brave, nurtured by the nymphs and under the watchful eye of Zeus. He became a skilled hunter, his heart drawn to the forests where his mother roamed in her enchanted form. The fates of mother and son seemed forever distant, until the day their paths crossed in the wild. One fateful afternoon, as Arcas ventured deep into the woods, he came upon a great bear. It was Callisto, who, upon seeing her son, felt her heart surge with joy and sorrow. She approached him gently, her massive form moving with the grace of the love she still held. But to Arcas, this was no tender reunion. He saw only a fierce beast, and raised his spear to defend himself. Zeus, watching from the heavens, could not bear to see tragedy strike. In a burst of divine power, he swept both mother and son into the stars. Callisto became Ursa Major, the Great Bear, and Arcas was transformed into Ursa Minor, the Little Bear, so they could remain together for all eternity. To honor Arcas's noble heart and his role as a guide, Zeus placed him near the North Star, the celestial beacon that helps travelers find their way. The stars of Ursa Minor form a graceful arc, culminating in Polaris, a symbol of constancy and navigation. Even now, Ursa Minor glides across the night sky, forever tethered to his mother, Ursa Major, their bond unbroken by time or distance. Together, they remind us of the enduring strength of love and the importance of finding our way home. When you look upon the little bear and see Polaris shining brightly, let it guide your heart as it has guided countless travelers through the ages. For the stars of Ursa Minor hold a timeless magic, a whisper that even in the vastness of the cosmos, love remains a steadfast light. Seek the spot in the night sky where stars glitter like the embers of ancient fires, their strides a mighty archer, bow drawn and ready, forever aiming toward the heart of the cosmos. This is Sagittarius, the archer, whose tale is steeped in bravery, wisdom, and the enduring bond between the heavens and the earth. Long ago, in an age when gods ruled the skies and heroes walked the earth, there lived a centaur named Cleitus. Unlike most centaurs, who were wild and unruly, Cleitus was known for his noble heart and boundless intellect. Born of a union between a mortal and a divine muse, Cleitus was blessed with extraordinary talents, blending the strength of his equine form with the artistry and wisdom of his divine lineage. Cleitus lived among the Muses, the goddesses of inspiration, who cherished his presence. He was not only a skilled hunter, but also a lover of the arts, crafting melodies and tales that wove beauty into the world. His arrows flew truer than any mortal's, and his songs touched the hearts of gods and men alike. One day, the heavens were threatened by a fearsome beast, an ancient chaos dragon that sought to unravel the stars themselves. Its fiery breath scorched the skies, and its claws raked the fabric of the universe. The gods, knowing they needed a hero of unmatched skill, called upon Cleitus to aid them. With unwavering courage, Cleitus rode forth, his bow strung with divine arrows, each tipped with starlight. His aim was flawless, and his heart steady. In a battle that shook the heavens, he struck the dragon down, restoring balance to the cosmos and earning the eternal gratitude of the gods. To honor his bravery and artistry, Zeus immortalized Cleitus among the stars as Sagittarius, the archer. His constellation, with its mighty bow drawn, serves as a reminder of the harmony between strength and creativity, action and inspiration. Sagittarius is positioned in the sky near the galactic center, pointing his arrow toward the heart of the Milky Way, as if forever guarding the gateway to the mysteries of the universe. His stars shine brightly during the late autumn nights, guiding travelers and dreamers alike. When you look up at the constellation Sagittarius, let its bow and arrow inspire you to aim for your highest aspirations and embrace the balance of courage and creativity within your own life. For the archer's tale is a reminder that even in the vastness of the cosmos, the spirit of adventure and the pursuit of wonder are what truly light the way. In the heavens above, where the stars shine with timeless brilliance, a regal figure prowls through the night sky. A mighty lion, his mane ablaze with celestial fire. This is Leo, the lion, whose story roars with courage, power, and the enduring spirit of heroism. Long ago, in the age of gods and great deeds, there was a fearsome beast known as the Nemean lion. Born of divine origins, it was no ordinary creature. Its golden hide was impervious to weapons, and its strength unmatched by any mortal or immortal. It roamed the hills of Nemea, terrorizing the land and striking fear into the hearts of all who crossed its path. The gods decreed that only a true hero could face this formidable foe. Thus, they summoned Heracles, the greatest of all heroes, to undertake this perilous task as the first of his 12 labors. Heracles, armed with his unyielding strength and the courage of his destiny, ventured into the lion's lair, deep within a dark and foreboding cave. The battle that ensued was one of legends. Heracles quickly realized that no sword or arrow could pierce the lion's enchanted hide. Undeterred, he discarded his weapons and faced the beast with his bare hands. The earth trembled as their struggle raged, but Heracles, with his unmatched determination, overpowered the lion, strangling it with his mighty arms. Triumphant, Heracles skinned the lion using its own claws, the only tool sharp enough to cut through its magical hide. He fashioned its pelt into a cloak and its head into a helmet, wearing them as symbols of his victory and protection against future dangers. The gods, impressed by Heracles' bravery and ingenuity, immortalized the Nemean lion in the stars as the constellation Leo. There, it stands as a testament to strength, resilience, and the triumph of courage over fear. Leo's constellation shines brightest in spring, its stars forming the proud shape of a lion, with its heart marked by the brilliant star Regulus, the little king. This celestial king of beasts reminds us to embrace our inner strength and face life's challenges with determination. When you gaze upon Leo in the night sky, let its regal form inspire you to rise to your own trials with courage and grace. For the lion's tale, written in starlight, roars with the timeless message that true strength lies not only in might but in the will to overcome. Our final constellation of the night is one whose story is steeped in heroism, sacrifice, and divine favor. This is Ares, the ram, whose story is woven from golden threads of courage and salvation. Long ago, in a kingdom ruled by jealousy and deceit, there lived a boy and a girl, Phrixus and Helle, the children of a mortal king. Their stepmother, Queen Ino, burned with envy toward them, and sought to destroy them to secure the throne for her own children. She devised a cruel plot, convincing the king that Phrixus and Helle must be sacrificed to end a famine she herself had caused. The desperate children prayed for deliverance, and their cries reached the heavens. Zeus, moved by their innocence, sent a magical ram with a golden fleece, a creature born of the gods and imbued with celestial power. The golden ram descended from the sky, its shimmering coat glowing like molten sunlight, and carried Phrixus and Helle upon its back, soaring high above the earth to safety. As they crossed the seas, tragedy struck. Helle lost her grip and fell into the waters below, which became known as the Hellespont in her memory. Though grief-stricken, the golden ram pressed onward, carrying Phrixus to the distant land of Colchis. There, the ram brought him safely to the court of King Aeetes, where Phrixus was welcomed and given refuge. In gratitude to the gods and the ram that saved him, Phrixus offered the golden ram as a sacred gift to Zeus. Its magnificent fleece was hung in a sacred grove, guarded by a fearsome dragon, and would later become the prize sought by Jason and the Argonauts in their legendary quest for the Golden Fleece. Zeus, to honor the ram's bravery and its role in saving Phrixus and Helle, placed it among the stars as the constellation Aries. Its stars form the shape of a ram's proud head, its light a beacon of hope, courage, and divine protection. Today, Aries shines brightly in the springtime sky, its brightest star, Hamal, marking the ram's noble spirit. The constellation reminds us of the power of resilience and the divine aid that can arrive when we face life's greatest challenges with faith and courage. When you look to the stars and find Aries, let its golden light guide your heart, reminding you that even in moments of peril, the heavens may send their magic to carry you to safety. Thank you for joining me tonight on this journey through the constellations. I hope these timeless stories have brought you a sense of peace and wonder. Remember, the stars above are always there, watching over us, carrying their stories across the vast expanse of the night sky. And just like them, you are a part of something infinite and beautiful. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll never miss another calming tale. Your next adventure in relaxation is just around the corner. Sweet dreams, and I'll see you again soon. Marley was dead, to begin with. There's no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good upon change for anything he chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Mind. I don't mean to say that I know, of my own knowledge, what there is particularly dead about a doornail. I might have been inclined, myself, to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade. But the wisdom of our ancestors is in the simile, and my unhallowed hands shall not disturb it, or the country's done for. You will therefore permit me to repeat, emphatically, that Marley was as dead as a doornail. Scrooge knew he was dead. Of course he did. How could it be otherwise? Scrooge and he were partners for I don't know how many years. Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole assign, his sole residuary legatee, his sole friend and sole mourner. And even Scrooge was not so dreadfully cut up by the sad event, but that he was an excellent man of business on the very day of the funeral, and solemnized it with an undoubted bargain. The mention of Marley's funeral brings me back to the point I started from. There is no doubt that Marley was dead. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story I am going to relate. If we were not perfectly convinced that Hamlet's father died before the play began, there would be nothing more remarkable in his taking a stroll at night, in an easterly wind, upon his own ramparts, than there would be in any other middle-aged gentleman rashly turning out after dark in a breezy spot, say St. Paul's churchyard, for instance, literally to astonish his son's weak mind. Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name. There it stood, years afterwards, above the warehouse door, Scrooge and Marley. The firm was known as Scrooge and Marley. Sometimes people new to the business called Scrooge, and sometimes Marley. But he answered to both names. It was all the same to him. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. Hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel had ever struck out generous fire. Secret and self-contained, and solitary as an oyster. The cold within him froze his old features, nipped his pointed nose, shriveled his cheek, stiffened his gait, made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke out shrewdly in his grating voice. A frosty rime was on his head, and on his eyebrows, and his wiry chin. He carried his own low temperature always about with him. He iced his office in the dog days, and didn't thaw it 1 degree at Christmas. External heat and cold had little influence on Scrooge. No warmth could warm, no wintry weather chill him. No wind that blew was bitterer than he. No falling snow was more intent upon its purpose. No pelting rain less open to entreaty. Foul weather didn't know where to have him. The heaviest rain and snow and hail and sleet could boast of the advantage over him in only one respect. They often came down handsomely, and Scrooge never did. Nobody ever stopped him in the street to say, with gladsome looks, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?" No beggars implored him to bestow a trifle. No children asked him what it was o'clock. No man or woman ever once in all his life inquired the way to such and such a place of Scrooge. Even the blind men's dogs appeared to know him, and when they saw him coming on, would tug their owners into doorways and up courts, and then would wag their tails as though they said, "No eye at all is better than an evil eye, dark master." But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked. To edge his way along the crowded paths of life, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance, was what the knowing ones call nuts to Scrooge. Once upon a time, of all the good days in the year, on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting house. It was cold, bleak, biting weather, foggy withal, and he could hear the people in the court outside go wheezing up and down, beating their hands upon their breasts and stamping their feet upon the pavement stones to warm them. The city clocks had only just gone 3, but it was quite dark already. It had not been light all day, and candles were flaring in the windows of the neighboring offices, like ruddy smears upon the palpable brown air. The fog came pouring in at every chink and keyhole, and was so dense without that although the court was of the narrowest, the houses opposite were mere phantoms. To see the dingy cloud come drooping down, obscuring everything, one might have thought that nature lived hard by, and was brewing on a large scale. The door of Scrooge's counting house was open that he might keep his eye upon his clerk, who, in a dismal little cell beyond, a sort of tank, was copying letters. Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like one coal. But he couldn't replenish it, for Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room, and so surely as the clerk came in with the shovel, the master predicted that it would be necessary for them to part. Wherefore the clerk put on his white comforter and tried to warm himself at the candle, in which effort, not being a man of a strong imagination, he failed. "A Merry Christmas, Uncle! God save you!" cried a cheerful voice. It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew, who came upon him so quickly that this was the first intimation he had of his approach. "Bah!" said Scrooge. "Humbug!" He had so heated himself with rapid walking in the fog and frost, this nephew of Scrooge's, that he was all in a glow. His face was ruddy and handsome, his eyes sparkled, and his breath smoked again. "Christmas a humbug, Uncle," said Scrooge's nephew. "You don't mean that, I am sure." "I do," said Scrooge. "Merry Christmas. What right have you to be merry? What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough." "Come then," returned the nephew gaily. "What right have you to be dismal? What reason have you to be morose? You're rich enough." Scrooge, having no better answer ready on the spur of the moment, said, "Bah," again, and followed it up with humbug. "Don't be cross, Uncle," said the nephew. "What else can I be," returned the uncle, "when I live in such a world of fools as this? Merry Christmas. Out upon Merry Christmas. What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older and not an hour richer. A time for balancing your books and having every item in 'em through a round dozen of months presented dead against you." "If I could work my will," said Scrooge indignantly, "every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. He should." "Uncle," pleaded the nephew. "Nephew," returned the uncle sternly, "keep Christmas in your own way and let me keep it in mine." "Keep it," repeated Scrooge's nephew, "but you don't keep it." "Let me leave it alone, then," said Scrooge. "Much good may it do you. Much good it has ever done you." "There are many things from which I might have derived good, by which I have not profited, I dare say," returned the nephew. "Christmas among the rest. But I am sure I have always thought of Christmas time, when it has come round, apart from the veneration due to its sacred name and origin, if anything belonging to it can be apart from that, as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. The only time I know of, in the long calendar of the year, when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely, and to think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave, and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, Uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good, and will do me good, and I say, God bless it." The clerk in the tank involuntarily applauded. Becoming immediately sensible of the impropriety, he poked the fire and extinguished the last frail spark forever. "Let me hear another sound from you," said Scrooge, "and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation. You're quite a powerful speaker, sir," he added, turning to his nephew. "I wonder you don't go into Parliament." "Don't be angry, Uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow." Scrooge said that he would see him. Yes, indeed he did. He went the whole length of the expression, and said that he would see him in that extremity first. "But why?" cried Scrooge's nephew. "Why?" "Why did you get married?" said Scrooge. "Because I fell in love." "Because you fell in love," growled Scrooge, as if that were the only one thing in the world more ridiculous than a Merry Christmas. "Good afternoon." "Nay, Uncle, but you never came to see me before that happened. Why give it as a reason for not coming now?" "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. "I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why cannot we be friends?" "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. "I am sorry, with all my heart, to find you so resolute. We have never had any quarrel to which I have been a party. But I have made the trial in homage to Christmas, and I'll keep my Christmas humor to the last. so, a Merry Christmas, Uncle." "Good afternoon," said Scrooge, "and a Happy New Year." "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. His nephew left the room without an angry word, notwithstanding. He stopped at the outer door to bestow the greetings of the season on the clerk, who, cold as he was warmer than Scrooge, for he returned them cordially. "There's another fellow," muttered Scrooge, who overheard him. "My clerk, with 15 shillings a week and a wife and family, talking about a Merry Christmas. I'll retire to Bedlam." This lunatic, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, had let 2 other people in. They were portly gentlemen, pleasant to behold, and now stood with their hats off in Scrooge's office. They had books and papers in their hands and bowed to him. "Scrooge and Marley's, I believe," said one of the gentlemen, referring to his list. "Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?" "Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years," Scrooge replied. "He died 7 years ago, this very night. We have no doubt his liberality is well represented by his surviving partner," said the gentleman, presenting his credentials. It certainly was, for they had been 2 kindred spirits. At the ominous word liberality, Scrooge frowned and shook his head, and handed the credentials back. "At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge," said the gentleman, taking up a pen, "it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute, who suffer greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessaries. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comforts, sir." "Are there no prisons?" asked Scrooge. "Plenty of prisons," said the gentleman, laying down the pen again. "And the Union workhouses?" demanded Scrooge. "Are they still in operation?" "They are." "Still," returned the gentleman, "I wish I could say they were not." "The treadmill and the poor law are in full vigor, then," said Scrooge. "Both very busy, sir." "Oh, I was afraid, from what you said at first, that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course," said Scrooge. "I'm very glad to hear it." "Under the impression that they scarcely furnish Christian cheer of mind or body to the multitude," returned the gentleman. "A few of us are endeavoring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink, and means of warmth. We choose this time because it is a time of all others when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for?" "Nothing," Scrooge replied. "You wish to be anonymous?" "I wish to be left alone," said Scrooge. "Since you ask me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help to support the establishments I have mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there. Many can't go there, and many would rather die." "If they would rather die," said Scrooge, "they had better do it, and decrease the surplus population. Besides, excuse me, I don't know that." "But you might know it," observed the gentleman. "It's not my business," Scrooge returned. "It's enough for a man to understand his own business and not to interfere with other people's. Mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, gentlemen." Seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue their point, the gentleman withdrew. Scrooge resumed his labors with an improved opinion of himself, and in a more facetious temper than was usual with him. Meanwhile, the fog and darkness thickened so that people ran about with flaring links, proffering their services to go before horses in carriages and conduct them on their way. The ancient tower of a church, whose gruff old bell was always peeping slyly down at Scrooge out of a Gothic window in the wall, became invisible, and struck the hours and quarters in the clouds, with tremulous vibrations afterwards, as if its teeth were chattering in its frozen head up there. The cold became intense. In the main street at the corner of the court, some laborers were repairing the gas pipes, and had lighted a great fire in a brazier, round which a party of ragged men and boys were gathered, warming their hands and winking their eyes before the blaze in rapture. The water plug being left in solitude, its overflowings sullenly congealed, and turned to misanthropic ice. The brightness of the shops, where holly sprigs and berries crackled in the lamp heat of the windows, made pale faces ruddy as they passed. Poulterers' and grocers' trades became a splendid joke, a glorious pageant, with which it was next to impossible to believe that such dull principles as bargain and sale had anything to do. But soon the steeples called good people all to church and chapel, and away they came, flocking through the streets in their best clothes and with their gayest faces. And at the same time, there emerged from scores of by-streets, lanes, and nameless turnings, innumerable people, carrying their dinners to the bakers' shops. The sight of these poor revelers appeared to interest the spirit very much, for he stood with Scrooge beside him in a baker's doorway, and taking off the covers as their bearers passed, sprinkled his incense on their dinners from his torch. It was a very uncommon kind of torch, for once or twice when there were angry words between some dinner carriers who had jostled each other, he shed a few drops of water on them from it, and their good humor was restored directly, for they said it was a shame to quarrel upon Christmas Day. And so it was. God love it, so it was. The office was closed in a twinkling, and Scrooge, with his thin lips blue, went homeward to his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern. Having read all the newspapers and beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book, went home to bed. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner. They were a gloomy suite of rooms, in a lowering pile of building up a yard, where it had so little business to be, that one could scarcely help fancying it must have run there when it was a young house, playing at hide-and-seek with other houses, and forgotten the way out again. It was old enough now, and dreary enough, for nobody lived in it but Scrooge, the other rooms being all let out as offices. The yard was so dark that even Scrooge, who knew its every stone, was fain to grope with his hands. The fog and frost so hung about the black old gateway of the house that it seemed as if the genius of the weather sat in mournful meditation on the threshold. Now it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door, except that it was very large. It is also a fact that Scrooge had seen it, night and morning, during his whole residence in that place. Also, that Scrooge had as little of what is called fancy about him as any man in the city of London, even including, which is a bold word, the corporation, aldermen, and livery. Let it also be borne in mind that Scrooge had not bestowed one thought on Marley, since his last mention of his 7 years dead partner that afternoon. And then let any man explain to me, if he can, how it happened that Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, without its undergoing any intermediate process of change, not a knocker, but Marley's face. Marley's face. It was not in impenetrable shadow as the other objects in the yard were, but had a dismal light about it, like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. It was not angry or ferocious, but looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned up on its ghostly forehead. The hair was curiously stirred, as if by breath or hot air, and, though the eyes were wide open, they were perfectly motionless. That, and its livid color, made it horrible. But its horror seemed to be in spite of the face and beyond its control, rather than a part of its own expression. As Scrooge looked fixedly at this phenomenon, it was a knocker again. To say that he was not startled, or that his blood was not conscious of a terrible sensation to which it had been a stranger from infancy, would be untrue. But he put his hand upon the key he had relinquished, turned it sturdily, walked in, and lighted his candle. He did pause with a moment's irresolution before he shut the door, and he did look cautiously behind it first, as if he half expected to be terrified with the sight of Marley's pigtail sticking out into the hall. But there was nothing on the back of the door except the screws and nuts that held the knocker on, so he said, "Pooh, pooh," and closed it with a bang. The sound resounded through the house like thunder. Every room above, and every cask in the wine merchant's cellars below, appeared to have a separate peal of echoes of its own. Scrooge was not a man to be frightened by echoes. He fastened the door and walked across the hall and up the stairs, slowly too, trimming his candle as he went. You may talk vaguely about driving a coach and six up a good old flight of stairs, or through a bad young Act of Parliament. But I mean to say, you might have got a hearse up that staircase and taken it broadwise, with the splinter bar towards the wall and the door towards the balustrades, and done it easy. There was plenty of width for that, and room to spare, which is perhaps the reason why Scrooge thought he saw a locomotive hearse going on before him in the gloom. Half a dozen gas lamps out of the street wouldn't have lighted the entry too well, so you may suppose that it was pretty dark with Scrooge's dip. Up Scrooge went, not caring a button for that. Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. But before he shut his heavy door, he walked through his rooms to see that all was right. He had just enough recollection of the face to desire to do that. Sitting room, bedroom, lumber room, all as they should be. Nobody under the table, nobody under the sofa, a small fire in the grate, spoon and basin ready, and the little saucepan of gruel. Scrooge had a cold in his head upon the hob. Nobody under the bed, nobody in the closet, nobody in his dressing gown, which was hanging up in a suspicious attitude against the wall. Lumber room as usual. Old fire guard, old shoes, 2 fish baskets, washing stand on 3 legs, and a poker. Quite satisfied, he closed his door and locked himself in. Double-locked himself in, which was not his custom. Thus, secured against surprise, he took off his cravat, put on his dressing gown and slippers and his nightcap, and sat down before the fire to take his gruel. It was a very low fire indeed, nothing on such a bitter night. He was obliged to sit close to it and brood over it before he could extract the least sensation of warmth from such a handful of fuel. The fireplace was an old one, built by some Dutch merchant long ago, and paved all round with quaint Dutch tiles, designed to illustrate the scriptures. There were Cains and Abels, Pharaoh's daughters, queens of Sheba, angelic messengers descending through the air on clouds like feather beds, Abrahams, Belshazzars, apostles putting off to sea in butter boats, hundreds of figures to attract his thoughts. And yet that face of Marley, 7 years dead, came like the ancient prophet's rod and swallowed up the whole. If each smooth tile had been a blank at first, with power to shape some picture on its surface from the disjointed fragments of his thoughts, there would have been a copy of old Marley's head on everyone. "Humbug," said Scrooge, and walked across the room. After several turns, he sat down again. As he threw his head back in the chair, his glance happened to rest upon a bell, a disused bell that hung in the room, and communicated for some purpose now forgotten with a chamber in the highest story of the building. It was with great astonishment, and with a strange, inexplicable dread, that as he looked, he saw this bell begin to swing. It swung so softly in the outset that it scarcely made a sound. But soon it rang out loudly, and so did every bell in the house. This might have lasted half a minute or a minute, but it seemed an hour. The bells ceased as they had begun, together. They were succeeded by a clanking noise deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain over the casks in the wine merchant's cellar. Scrooge then remembered to have heard that ghosts in haunted houses were described as dragging chains. The cellar door flew open with a booming sound, and then he heard the noise much louder on the floors below. Then coming up the stairs, then coming straight towards his door. "It's humbug still," said Scrooge. "I won't believe it." His color changed, though, when, without a pause, it came on through the heavy door, and passed into the room before his eyes. Upon its coming in, the dying flame leaped up, as though it cried, "I know him, Marley's ghost," and fell again. The same face, the very same. Marley in his pigtail, usual waistcoat, tights, and boots, the tassels on the latter bristling like his pigtail, and his coat skirts, and the hair upon his head. The chain he drew was clasped about his middle. It was long, and wound about him like a tail, and it was made, for Scrooge observed it closely, of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, deeds, and heavy purses wrought in steel. His body was transparent, so that Scrooge, observing him and looking through his waistcoat, could see the 2 buttons on his coat behind. Scrooge had often heard it said that Marley had no bowels, but he had never believed it until now. "No, nor did he believe it even now," said Scrooge in answer to his own thought, though he looked the phantom through and through, and saw it standing before him, though he felt the chilling influence of its death-cold eyes, and marked the very texture of the folded kerchief bound about its head and chin, which wrapper he had not observed before. He was still incredulous, and fought against his senses. "How now?" said Scrooge, caustic and cold as ever. "What do you want with me?" "Much." Marley's voice, no doubt about it. "Who are you?" "Ask me who I was." "Who were you, then?" said Scrooge, raising his voice. "You're particular for a shade." He was going to say, "to a shade," but substituted this as more appropriate. "In life I was your partner, Jacob Marley." Can you sit down?" asked Scrooge, looking doubtfully at him. "I can." "Do it, then." Scrooge asked the question because he didn't know whether a ghost so transparent might find himself in a condition to take a chair, and felt that in the event of its being impossible, it might involve the necessity of an embarrassing explanation. But the ghost sat down on the opposite side of the fireplace, as if he were quite used to it. "You don't believe in me," observed the ghost. "I don't," said Scrooge. "What evidence would you have of my reality beyond that of your senses?" "I don't know," said Scrooge. "Why do you doubt your senses?" "Because," said Scrooge, "a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you. whatever you are." Scrooge was not much in the habit of cracking jokes, nor did he feel in his heart by any means waggish then. The truth is that he tried to be smart, as a means of distracting his own attention and keeping down his terror. For the specter's voice disturbed the very marrow in his bones. To sit, staring at those fixed, glazed eyes in silence for a moment, would play, Scrooge felt, the very deuce with him. There was something very awful, too, in the specter's being provided with an infernal atmosphere of its own. Scrooge could not feel it himself, but this was clearly the case, for though the ghost sat perfectly motionless, its hair and skirts and tassels were still agitated as by the hot vapor from an oven. "You see this toothpick?" said Scrooge, returning quickly to the charge for the reason just assigned, and wishing, though it were only for a second, to divert the vision's stony gaze from himself. "I do," replied the ghost. "You are not looking at it," said Scrooge. "But I see it," said the ghost, notwithstanding. "Well," returned Scrooge, "I have but to swallow this, and be for the rest of my days persecuted by a legion of goblins, all of my own creation. Humbug, I tell you, humbug." At this, the spirit raised a frightful cry, and shook its chain with such a dismal and appalling noise that Scrooge held on tight to his chair to save himself from falling in a swoon. But how much greater was his horror when the phantom, taking off the bandage round its head, as if it were too warm to wear indoors, its lower jaw dropped down upon its breast. Scrooge fell upon his knees and clasped his hands before his face. "Mercy," he said. "Dreadful apparition, why do you trouble me?" "Man of the worldly mind," replied the ghost, "do you believe in me or not?" "I do," said Scrooge. "I must. But why do spirits walk the earth, and why do they come to me?" "It is required of every man," the ghost returned, "that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow-men, and travel far and wide. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. It is doomed to wander through the world. Oh, woe is me! And witness what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth and turned to happiness." Again the spectre raised a cry, and shook its chain and wrung its shadowy hands. "You are fettered," said Scrooge, trembling. "Tell me why." "I wear the chain I forged in life," replied the ghost. "I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. Is its pattern strange to you?" Scrooge trembled more and more. "Or, would you know," pursued the ghost, "the weight and length of the strong coil you bear yourself? It was full as heavy and as long as this, 7 Christmas Eves ago. You have labored on it since. It is a ponderous chain." Scrooge glanced about him on the floor, in the expectation of finding himself surrounded by some 50 or 60 fathoms of iron cable. But he could see nothing. "Jacob," he said imploringly. "Old Jacob Marley, tell me more. Speak comfort to me, Jacob." "I have none to give," the ghost replied. "It comes from other regions, Ebenezer Scrooge, and is conveyed by other ministers to other kinds of men. Nor can I tell you what I would. A very little more is all permitted to me. I cannot rest, I cannot stay. I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our counting house. Mark me. In life, my spirit never roved beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing hole, and weary journeys lie before me." "It was no doubt very dull and tedious," observed Scrooge. Dull and tedious, echoed the ghost. It was my business. Business. Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. It held up its chain at arm's length, as if that were the cause of all its unavailing grief, and flung it heavily upon the ground again. At this time of the rolling year, the spectre said, I suffer most. Why did I walk through crowds of fellow beings with my eyes turned down, and never raise them to that blessed star which led the wise men to a poor abode? Were there no poor homes to which its light would have conducted me? Scrooge was very much dismayed to hear the spectre going on at this rate, and began to quake exceedingly. Hear me, cried the ghost, my time is nearly gone. I will, said Scrooge, but don't be hard upon me. Don't be flowery, Jacob. Pray. How it is that I appear before you in a shape that you can see, I may not tell. I have sat invisible beside you many and many a day. It was not an agreeable idea. Scrooge shivered and wiped the perspiration from his brow. That is no light part of my penance, pursued the ghost. I am here tonight to warn you that you have yet a chance and hope of escaping my fate, a chance and hope of my procuring Ebenezer. You were always a good friend to me, said Scrooge. Thank ye. You will be haunted, resumed the ghost, by 3 spirits. Scrooge's countenance fell almost as low as the ghost's had done. Is that the chance and hope you mentioned, Jacob? He demanded in a faltering voice. It is. I think I'd rather not, said Scrooge. Without their visits, said the ghost, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first tomorrow when the bell tolls 1. Couldn't I take 'em all at once and have it over, Jacob? Hinted Scrooge. Expect the second on the next night at the same hour. The third upon the next night when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. Look to see me no more, and look that, for your own sake, you remember what has passed between us. When it had said these words, the spectre took its wrapper from the table and bound it round its head as before. Scrooge knew this by the smart sound its teeth made when the jaws were brought together by the bandage. He ventured to raise his eyes again, and found his supernatural visitor confronting him in an attitude of perfect melancholy. Its ghostly eyes were fixed upon him. As Scrooge looked, it raised a mournful cry and shook its chain with a dismal and appalling noise and fled into the darkness, leaving Scrooge in terror. Thank you for joining us tonight on Mr. Sleep's story. We hope this story has brought you peace, relaxation, and perhaps a bit of holiday cheer. If you enjoyed this bedtime reading, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more soothing stories to help you unwind and drift off to sleep. We'd love to hear your thoughts or suggestions for future tales in the comments below. Until next time, may your nights be restful, your dreams be sweet, and your heart be light. Sleep well, and happy holidays.